One of the things on my bucket list was to learn how to sail, and I did. Yippee for me. I received about 3 hours of instruction. 1 hour was in Club Med, Cuba, and the other 2 hours of instruction were at Club Med in Cancun. We would go to Cancun regularly every time we could get a holiday once a year. And I got about 20 hours of experience just sailing by myself. I learned on Hobie Cat, and I seem to remember they were 3.5 meter or 4.5 meters, something like that. I don't know what the meters is, like square meters in sail or meters of length. I don't know what it is, but I remember it was a Hobie Cat. And I had so much fun. I learned how to tack. I could go into the wind. I could turn. We went on an excursion. They called it an Armada. One of the times at Cancun. That was the funnest because you could just get in. You didn't have to turn around. You just sailed for this distant point of land. You could see this big pink hotel on a beach. I think it was south of Cancun, of where we were at the Club Med, and you just sailed straight. Oh, that was so much fun. You felt like you were getting somewhere. Whereas if you sail in the 1 kilometer limit zone around the Cancun resort, you're always turning. Like you can only go straight for maximum 5 minutes, and then you have to turn, and then you have to turn, and then you have to turn. So I took it upon myself to challenge myself to become a better sailor. Oh, I also learned how to right the boat. I really like catamarans because they're much more stable, and for the same square footage of sail, I think you go faster because the more stable platform of a catamaran is able to resist the wind because you're not tipping so much. The single hull boats, like the V hull boats, they just tip right over and they give a lot of that wind away. Whereas the catamaran, it wants to fight the tipping over, the tendency to tip over. So it'll go faster, stay more stable. So I would do as much sailing as I could for each time I was there, at least half an hour to an hour a day when I was on a 1 week vacation to Cancun. And, it was fun with low wind, fun with medium wind, and fun with high wind. One time I had done about 45 minutes of sailing, and they didn't really want you to, the instructors didn't want you to hog the boat, so you had to come in after. They wanted a half hour, but I'd always push it to 45 minutes to an hour. But if I saw that there was a lot of people waiting, then I'd bring it in at the half-hour mark. But if I saw there was no one, then I would push it. I'd stay out longer. One time I had been sailing for maybe about half an hour in the morning, and I went to the little restaurant at Cancun, Club Med Cancun, and it's called Lapa Lapa, and it's got a really nice view. One side of the restaurant has a view of the sailing area. So the wind was quite calm, so half an hour is enough. So I went to the restaurant, and I'd been there for about half an hour, and the wind just picked up like crazy. All the people on boats were flipping over, flipping over, flipping over. All of them had flipped over. I said, that's it. I want to sail in this wind right now. So they're all dejected and demoralized because they flipped their boat. Well, I had learned how to right the boats. I didn't care. So I went down there, and the guys had known me, and I said, don't come save me unless you see me and I can't right the boat. Give me 3 tries. If you're looking in the binoculars, give me 3 good tries before you come out to save me, because I want to learn how to right the boat. And they agreed with that. So I got out there, and I'm just flying. I don't know how fast I'm going. It must be 30 miles an hour. Okay? And on water, they call it knots. I must be going 30 knots. I'm just screaming like a motorcycle. And when that sail, when you do your turn, you got to be real quick, and you got to do it just right. And if you get everything right, you'll get to a point where you've switched direction, and the wind fills your sail again. And it's just it throws you in the back of your seat. Like, I mean, if you don't hang on, it's like dropping the clutch in a manual transmission vehicle. It just, you can feel the entire boat just lunge forward, and if you aren't hanging on, you're falling into the water. So that was so much fun. I did not tip over. When everyone else was tipping over, I did not tip over. And I tacked. And I was covering that distance in a minute and a half to 2 minutes. And so back and forth, back and forth. I said, okay, I have to turn as much as I can to prove that I'm actually doing it. I'm actually able to sail in these high winds where everyone else is tipping over. When I tipped over, it was like in the very beginning when I was learning how to turn. And in fact, one of those times was with Wendy on board, my second wife. So I took her out, and because I wanted to go with somebody, right? So I took Wendy. And I was at the tiller. Wendy was on one of the pontoons. Well, when you're heading out, you're going against the waves, and your front pontoons, they dig in. Like every wave, it goes boom. And it's kind of a motion like this, like you start to speed up because the wind is pushing your sail, and then your pontoons dig into the waves. So there's like a good 1.5 to 2 feet of wave coming over the front of those pontoons. So it's a boom, and you're throwing forward. And then you come out, and then you're lunging forward, and then boom, into the waves again. So you're digging, and Wendy she didn't like that at all. She thought we were going to sink. I said, no, you just hang on to the boat. Don't let go, and the boat will float, and then you can get going again. So then I turned around, and I dropped her off at the shore. We came in. Another day I took Jennifer out, and she was completely fine with the boat digging into the waves, and she was understanding how all the physics worked. And I said, okay, I'll teach you how to sail. So I was teaching Jennifer how to sail a little bit that day. Well, the next day it was more calm, and it was better sailing for teaching. So I got us out to an area past the swimming point, and we switched positions. So Jennifer took the tiller, and I took the high pontoon. So when you're sailing a catamaran, there's always a low pontoon and a high pontoon, and you want your weight on the high pontoon. Otherwise, you'll flip. So I got us all positioned up, and we're sailing along. Everything's fine. I'm teaching Jennifer how to basically sail, just how to go forward, how to catch enough of the wind that you can remain in control. You're not flipping over, and you're steering. You can go, mostly where you want to go. Don't have to tack yet. So we're in a good position. We're in a happy place. And then Jennifer, she kind of leans forward and she says, "What's that black line?" And I'm thinking, there should be no black line. I turn around and I see a kite for tourists, like a 2-person kite, off to my right. Giant kite, but they're way off in the distance. And then I look to my left, and I see the motorboat. Now, the people in the kite are waving frantically at us. The people in the boat are waving frantically at us, and I look up, and there is a guy wire, black guy wire, going right across our path. I remained calm. I said, "Switch me positions," just like that, only a little bit louder than that. And Jennifer was a good soldier. She just started leaning forward, kept her hand on the tiller, leaned forward, started to crawl out of position. I climbed into position. We switched position, probably 4 seconds. I did not hesitate. I just took that tiller and just rammed it to the right. Actually, in the direction we were going. No, it was to, yeah. Well, right and left is opposites on the tiller. So I tillered right to turn the boat left, because the guy wire was in this kind of a direction, okay? I tell you no word of a lie. We traveled parallel with that guy wire, the tow wire, for probably 20 feet or so. And I could tell that that wire was about a foot below the tip of our mast. And if I'd hit that thing, it would have tipped us over, because the massive amount of leverage that you would have had pulling on the tip of the mast, and that mast is guy wired to the pontoons. So, and we're traveling, there's a lot of weight. I don't know what would have happened to the people on the kite. Boat probably would have been fine. It would have just been towed backwards a little bit. But our boat would have, the mast would have been pulled out of the guy wires, collapsed. The mast itself is dangerous. If the guy wires snap, it's just a flying piece of metal pipe. Could have hit one of us in the head. No, I traveled parallel to the line, and I just looked at it. I'm just staring at it with my hand on the tiller, and I'm going parallel, just to make little micro adjustments, keeping myself parallel. And it was exactly the right direction and the right decision. So I kept parallel, and then I saw the guy wire, because the angle of it rose above our mast, and then it just gently turned back to the right. Whew, that was scary, because I could have caused a lot of damage. Now the people in the kite, I think they're able to float if they come down in the water. But if their cable gets yanked, I don't know what would happen. Maybe the kite would go face first in the water and they're strapped into position. Anyway, that was a near miss. Okay, the closest near miss. I mean, I had tipped the boat, my catamaran, when I was learning. I flipped it 3 times, maybe 4 times, and I was able to right it every time. My instructor, he flipped the boat with me on it, and it was to train me. He purposely flipped it. He said, this is exactly what you need to do in case you flip. You have to unhook the sail, because the clinginess of the water is going to prevent you from lifting the mast out. You have to unhook the sail. Then there's a righting rope, which you grab, and it's tied at the bottom of the mast, and you throw it over the high pontoon. Then you swim around to the other side, and then you just start arm over arm, hand over hand, climbing that rope so that your entire body weight is pulling on that high pontoon, and it'll pull the mast out of the water, and the sail will kind of follow the mast, but the clinginess will be eliminated because the sail's being pulled out vertically in a sheet. And your weight on a 3.5 meter Hobie cat, your own body weight is enough to right it. So I've done that a few times. Anyway, that was my sailing adventures with Jennifer and with Wendy. I loved it. So glad I learned, because I'd wanted to learn that since I was a kid. I didn't know how could a boat tack, how could a boat sail against the wind. Now I know. Anyway, thanks for joining me for this story. It's fun to tell.